Before I start talking about food, I want to share a little experience that I had earlier in life. I played a lot of baseball growing up, and one of the coaches that I had, thankfully he wasn't talking to me when he made this statement, but he said, sometimes a pitcher, when they're warming up, needs to throw the first pitch over the backstop in order to make a statement, in order to say, this pitcher really, he may look like a pitcher, he may throw, 98 miles an hour, but he can't hit the broadside of a barn. And, once you throw that first pitch, everything from there is smoothed over. I look back in many experiences in my life where, there's plenty of anticipation and lead up to events. And once you get the first pitch thrown, even if it's over the backstop, you still have the first pitch out of your system, and the rest can follow there. So I wanted to first say thank you to Janice for giving me some guidance and some framework to work within in my presentation today. It's a pleasure and an honor, really, to be able to speak with you. And, as you may know and probably have heard from every other speaker, that each one of us have been, we've each chosen a word. The word that I chose was change. And so, change comes about in many ways. Sometimes it comes from necessity. Sometimes it comes from natural evolution, from boredom, or the specific events of any one particular time. But it was a change in my understanding of ingredients that led me to a very important discovery. And it was a discovery at the time that I sort of thought was a secret, and now that I have the chance to talk about it, I don't want it to be a secret. I think it's a time that everybody understand the power of our ingredients and not only where they come from, but what they're grown in, soil. My experience as a child, you may wonder why there's this slide up here. My experience as a child took me all over the place. And believe it or not, before I could drive, I was working in a theater. And I worked in this theater pretty much from the time that I could remember until I could drive. And during that time, I bear witness to the successes of live performance, the thrill of success, the agony of defeat, and certainly all of the things in between. And it was my time there that really gave me an appreciation for what it takes to deliver a live performance, for what it takes to really prepare yourself for that eventuality. And so during my time there, Joseph was a show that I ended up being in about 210 performances of during my time there. So I could probably recite the entire libretto if I had to. If I wasn't at the theater, I was involved in athletics. Like I mentioned earlier, baseball, racquetball, bowling, hockey, or not hockey, but football, all kinds of athletics. And it was the team athletics that really gave me an appreciation for motivators, for people that could bring out the best in you regardless of the situation. I look back at this, you have a busy night in the kitchen, and everybody's going to work extra hard tonight. They're not making any more on an hourly basis. But somehow, somewhere, someplace inside, they believe that this is the right thing to do. And hopefully I'm the person to have given them the strength and the belief that what they're doing is for the right reason. Athletics was important, but clearly it's not where I ended up. There have been many, many culinary mentors in my life. I have never cooked in the kitchen with Julia Child, rest her soul, but I've certainly cooked for her and spoken with her on a number of occasions at Gramercy Tavern. And, Julia Child, Jeff Smith, these were people, 30, 40 years ago, Jean-Louis Paladin, who were breaking ground for chefs of the future to be able to do the things that I do and love to do now. Jean-Louis, for example, he really brought back from France the idea that the multi-course meal was hip, and in fact, to focus on ingredients and not just, this is the recipe and it's going to be like this and that's exactly what it is and rigid, rigid, rigid. No, he had a different idea, and that was very important for me to be able to be around. In fact, I was afforded the opportunity to cook with him on a number of occasions. Really a fantastic time. I then went to culinary school shortly after a stint at the University of Southern California. And my time at the Culinary Institute of America, like you heard, was tremendously valuable. I made contacts and, more importantly, was afforded an opportunity to do an internship. An internship at the Culinary Institute of America is a 21-week internship. You work full-time, most of the time unpaid. And I had applied to about a dozen restaurants in Manhattan, and some friends of the family said, "Had you applied to Gramercy Tavern?" And I said, "No, I've never even heard of the restaurant." And they said, "Well, it's quickly becoming one of our favorite restaurants. You should apply." So I applied, and the next day, Tom Colicchio himself called me and said, "Why don't you come into trail?" So trailing means, come and spend some time in the kitchen, get all dressed up, just like you would if you're a baseball player. Get all dressed up, put on your uniform, and see what it's like to be in this kitchen. Well, I walked in that kitchen, and I didn't need to walk in any other kitchens after that. By the way, Gramercy had spent over $1 million on their kitchen alone at the time, and was one of the foremost kitchen. Was a kitchen that was respected throughout the city at the time. So I spent the next 6 years of my life at Gramercy Tavern, and was afforded, well, I don't like to use that word. I was given the opportunity to work with some really terrific people. And this photograph, that's me right there in the center. This is Tom Colicchio. That's Marco Canora. He was a Iron Chef candidate. Right next to him is Claudia Fleming, a James Beard Award-winning pastry chef, Chef of the Year. Sisha, he's the chef of Witchcraft in New York. Bobby Duncan, he and I opened about 3 restaurants in South Carolina. And Juliette Pope, she's still at Gramercy Tavern today. In fact, she's probably worked more stations at that restaurant than anyone else. So, change. It was time for me to move from just sort of experiencing things to making things happen. And I certainly appreciate Ed's presentation earlier about really taking matters into your own hand and not allowing what's been given to you to dictate exactly what you end up with, to take matters into your own hand. So what I've done is at Enoterra we have a farm. And this farm allows us to produce, many, many varieties of produce. Last year alone, we produced over 250 varieties of produce and herbs, almost 10,000 pounds of produce that we used at the restaurant, in fact, all the restaurants, some of which ended up in some of the local schools as well, and other volunteer groups for that matter. Part of running the farm was selecting seeds, and this is incredibly important. As time moves on here, we find more and more seed companies, Monsanto, imagine that's a seed company, by the way, taking the best seeds for themselves. And so much so that the heirloom varieties are harder to find, yet the heirloom varieties are the varieties that you want, even as a local gardener, because the heirloom varieties are naturally predispositioned to access the minerals and elements that are in the soil, even at your house, even in your farm, at the local garden, anywhere. That's how they work. I do a lot of work with kids, and there's nothing better and nothing more rewarding in my life than spending time with my kids and seeing their enthusiasm and seeing the way that they naturally accept Mother Earth, soil, the act of putting a seed in the ground and watching it grow, and then perhaps even harvesting the seeds to be able to do that again and again doesn't really cost all that much. A packet of seeds, from Johnny Seeds, $2.95, and you can grow enough food for 3 weeks for $2.95. So, if you buy the right seeds. So, the seed selection and the seed process and planting these seeds, both literally and figuratively, with our youth in this community is incredibly important to me. I've spent many days and hours working with elementary school children to get them to taste raw ingredients. I did a tasting at a local food store, and there were about 8 children there, the oldest of which was 8 years old. And we made carrot soup, and we made it 2 different ways. One, we seasoned it from the beginning, and the other, we seasoned it both with salt. And the ingredient list was carrots, that was it. One we seasoned right from the beginning, and the other we seasoned with salt right at the end. And wouldn't you know it, every student, every person in the class preferred the one that was seasoned right from the beginning. So without any predisposition, without any understanding of seasoning, layering, the multitude of how long to cook the carrots, they all inherently knew that the one that was seasoned from the beginning was the one that they wanted. When I tasted children on raw asparagus and they told me it tasted like green peas, I thought to myself, how the hell do they know what green peas taste like? I mean, granted, they can taste the canned green pea any time, but how do they know what a raw green pea tastes like? Somebody's clearly gotten to them before I have, and that was awesome. So, I'm just helping them along. And this is something that is incredibly, like I said, incredibly important to me moving forward. Change. A chef in the 21st century has many, many roles. Myself, I'm probably an eccentric people pleaser. I like to please people, and then I like to do it again and again and again. And, 30 years ago, the chef did that from behind closed doors. They rarely got out from the kitchen. In fact, today, it's quite the opposite. You'll find a chef in the kitchen, but you'll find them on the dining room floor. You'll find them at the farm. You'll find them in elementary schools. You'll find them in Washington, D.C. You'll find them all over the country with a message that is not complicated, but very approachable. Depending upon what chef it is, that message can range from the importance of soil to the importance of nutrition to the importance of just trying things. That was one of the messages that we instilled in the children, was that just the act of trying this produce, you could spit it out, I don't care, but put it in your mouth and try it. See what it tastes like. Understand that this is nutrition, this is health. And by the way, we never told them that it was full of nutrients. By the way, it was grown in soil that was incredibly nutrient dense. That's just the fringe benefits. Imagine a child 10 years from now or 20 years from now that doesn't need to take a vitamin because all the minerals and nutrients that they need started in the soil, grew a healthy plant, grew a healthy child, and into a healthy adult. We have the technology, we have the means, and we certainly have the ability to plant these seeds, again, both literally and figuratively, to ensure our future as a community that is healthy and well-being. This is the earth, pretty big place. Sometimes I think about my 1-acre farm. That's sometimes more than I can handle. But the earth, that's pretty big. We all agree on that. 30% of the earth is land, right? That's what you can walk on. That's what we're talking about here. And only 3% of that is planted for food consumption. 3%. So that's not very much. Now here's something even more alarming. Of that 3%, we're really only interested in the top 6 inches of soil. So when a previous presenter talked about the delta being wiped clean of topsoil, that only took 6 inches. But that's those 6 inches that's full of nutrients and full of minerals that can't be brought back with just simply putting in a little bit of NPK, nitrogen, all these things, 3 elements that are important in plant growth. But the point is that we need to take care of this top 6 inches. We had a group of diners in the restaurant the other night, and they were soil conservationists. And so I said to them, is it your goal as a soil conservationist to simply preserve a space, or do you take into consideration the quality of that space, what that soil can produce? Turns out that when you look at the limiting factor of plants and soil, every step along the way is a limiting factor. Can you imagine a tomato plant that could produce 150 pounds of tomatoes? It's possible, but there are limiting factors along the way. Imagine a pepper plant that's 9 feet tall. They're out there. But it comes from finding the biggest seed first. It comes from germinating it in soil that's predispositioned to set the digestive tract of that plant. It comes from putting it out into the ground when it's not too cold out. Don't force it in there. Why? You wouldn't put a baby and put him outside and think that it's going to strengthen them. No way. Why do that to your plants? So when we think about the top 6 inches and we think about what we can do with that, the potential is really limitless. Conventional wisdom with regards to farming is, I don't want to say it's passé, but it's certainly time we look closely at it. The concept of get big or get out as a farmer meant that farmers were less interested in developing the soil and just simply taking from the soil. Or if they were going to put back in the soil, they would do it in a water-soluble system. This is hydroponics. Where's the soil? There's none. Where's the nutrients? Not too much out there. That's why we need to eat 5 apples now instead of 1 to keep the doctor away a day. Right? The nutrient level in so much of our food has declined over the years because we haven't focused on how the soil really is the essential building block of nutrition and well-being. Why do I do all this? This is a menu. We mark it up all the time. We change things. And somebody asked me one time, do you cook for yourself or do you cook for other people? Who do you cook for? And I thought to myself, that's a very tough question because, people are going to think different things based on what you answer. And so I thought to myself, well, the reality is I cook for myself. But then I try and fit it on, in this case, an 8.5 by 14 piece of paper. Because the reality is I cook what inspires me. I use ingredients that move me forward. I use techniques and put ingredients together that I think will inspire you in the end. I don't go out to say, oh, this person's absolutely going to love this. If that's the end result, that's terrific. But certainly I look to please myself through pleasing other people. That's how I go about it. 3% food. This is a very, very, very important point. And, if every child knew what a raw English pea tasted like, I think we'd be making some headway. What if they knew that they could grow it for themselves in their own backyard with little or no training? All it takes is March 28th, pop this little green pea in the ground, and 45 days later, you're eating green peas. It's that simple. A little bit of sun, a little bit of water, with the right soil, you're that much better off. My secret ingredient is soil, and certainly I have changed the way I value soil as it relates to cooking, both for myself and for all of you. Thank you very much.